Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for the kind of debating that really elevates the scrutiny of bills in this House. There was a conscious effort to address a number of concerns that were heard in the first part of the debate so far, and I truly appreciate the effort. I just wanted to ask two quick questions and clarify. First of all, Mr. Speaker, it's not true that it's merely an extension of the existing C-23 procedures, because Section 143, sub 2.11 actually is reworded to prohibit the authorization of any documents to be used for ID unless issued by a government entity in Canada or by an entity incorporated or formed in Canada. The wording is actually done in a way that a number of possible things that are currently amongst the 39 pieces of ID may no longer easily qualify. Private leases that are not issued by corporations is one, and the other is it's going to be very unclear whether utility bills, credit card bills, etc. necessarily meet this new definition. I'm not saying this is deliberate, but the government has tried to come up with a definition of documents originating in Canada that actually, it appears, does not cover all 39 that currently exist. And I know Elections Canada is very concerned about the administrative chaos that this could cause. The second question is one sentence, which is there any harm? Is there any harm in extending the period when one can actually register, especially when you have fixed statutory elections?
Honourable Minister of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my colleague's first question, talking to folks who have been involved in the drafting of this bill, trying to get some clarification on his first point, my understanding is the intent of the wording around that particular clause is to ensure that the identification can be verified as having a Canadian source. So that's point number one. Point number two, the verification is happening in Canada. I know that there was some discussion earlier about whether or not somebody at a poll could look at this, etc. But just to clarify, this verification process is happening in Canada. All that said, I'm sure that this is a point of clarification that will come up in more technical detail in committee, and certainly I hope that the House on next reading of this bill would be able to speak to it in greater depth. With regard to the time period for registration, again, there's precedence for the time period that is prescribed in this Act, and that is the special balloting procedures that we currently abide by under the Canada Elections Act. In every instance that I've heard, this process happens without incident, and certainly that precedent should be good enough to show that this could be applied to under this particular Act.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the member answering the question I had posed to her colleague in regards to examples of what's within the legislation that would have been a part of recommendations coming from Elections Canada. And I think it's primarily because, Mr. Speaker, people across Canada as a whole have a deep amount of respect for Elections Canada. They see it as an independent agency, as it is, I must say, and they do phenomenal work in protecting the integrity of our democratic system and our elections. And my question to the member is that she's cited one. Can she indicate if, in fact, there are other aspects of the legislation that have come to the government through a recommendation by Elections Canada outside of the citizenship and immigration aspect?
Honourable Minister of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to avail myself of this opportunity to remind my colleague opposite of what the function of us as parliamentarians is in this place, and that is to make laws. So certainly the ruling that was put forward, the Frank ruling, creates some circumstances which must be addressed in terms of legislation, in terms of ensuring that there's clarity on voting procedures for approximately 1.4 million, which I would loosely say are new electors to Canada. I think that it is incumbent upon this House, again, respecting Elections Canada as an organization which serves the Canadian people, to also understand that sometimes laws comes from parliamentarians, because that's our job.